Hello from Estonia and welcome back to the Startup in Estonia podcast, produced by Startup Estonia and hosted by me, Adam Rang. This is the final episode of season 3. I've got to say, I've never actually hosted a podcast before, so I've been a bit unpolished, but I'm really grateful for all the feedback you guys have given me over the past 5 episodes of this season. And in this season, we wanted to explore different aspects of building a startup with expert advice from the people who have already done it themselves. So we wanted to know what they got right and what they got wrong. Because, we all make mistakes, and it's just really good to be open about these things. What's more important is what we learn from them. So we've been talking to some awesome founders with lots of different digital services. In today's show, though, we're going to do things a little bit different, something very unusual to a lot of us in the startup world. We're going to talk about physical products. And we're joined by Kristjan Maruste, the founder and CEO of Comodule. Welcome, Kristjan.
Hello, happy to be here.
Thank you. So we're going to learn a lot more about Comodule soon. I just want to remind listeners, though, like in the first episode, we were interviewing Rein Ranu, a startup founder who became a film director. And he was talking to us about how to make a compelling company story. But Rein is the director of one of my favorite movies, which is Chasing Unicorns, an Estonian movie. Kristjan, I don't know if you've seen it before.
Of course I have. We booked the whole cinema for our team.
Ah, wow.
And there's actually a very, very good story with it. The whole idea of the movie was to build an autonomous bike, if you remember correctly, a self-driving bicycle. When we started in 2014 with Comodule, we were going to our first big fair, Eurobike fair. It's the biggest bike fair in the world. Nobody knew us, so we were discussing we should build something special to get media attention. So we sat down in a room and we're thinking, hey, what could we do? Some cool prototype or product that would get people's attention. Everybody besides one guy were mechanical engineers, and this one guy, Hagar, a co-founder, he's a software engineer, and he was like, hey guys, but let's build a self-driving bicycle. And they're all like, oh God, you bloody programmers, go do your things. So we think for the whole day, we don't come up with very good ideas. We just have some list. We go home, and in the morning we came back, and everybody's like, yep, we don't have a better idea. A self-driving bicycle it is. So basically in 2015, we built a 3-wheel self-driving bicycle. We called it the world's first autonomous e-bike prototype. And we took it to this German fair. And we did a press conference. 2 people showed up. But it actually worked. So if you want to see it, you should put Der Spiegel, this German newspaper, Der Spiegel, and then Comodule in Google, and you will see a very funny video about it. Maybe we can link it in the YouTube later. And anyway, we built this kind of prototype thingy. We did a press conference. 2 people showed up, 2 journalists. But then it turned out that one of them was working for, like a news agency, something like Reuters, but the German version of it. And she got super excited about it, and she wrote about it. And then we started getting calls from different German newspapers, and ended up in a video story from Spiegel, which is like, Delphi in Estonia, like the biggest online newspaper. So that was a very funny thing. We got a lot of media attention in building the world's first autonomous e-bike prototype. And later I got calls from like German Post saying, hey, we would be interested in this technology. And we're like, what the should we build self-driving bicycles? And then I actually reached out to some of my colleagues or mates from Teltech, and then one of them said, just wait for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, Starship announced and came out. So it was a very weird setup. But the funniest thing was that when Unicorn movie came out, we went with the whole team to watch it, and it was so much more hilarious for us than it was for other people, because we've done it before. So
did Rein base that?
No, Rein didn't know about it. He found out after the premiere that we had done it. I sent him the link, and he was like mind blown. So the funny part was that you built this. You kind of sit down as directors, and you think, hey, what would be the craziest story that we could make a movie out of it? Hey, let's build a self-driving bike, and then it turns out that somebody already has done it. So
this is art imitating real life.
Yeah, it's documentary.
So for those who haven't seen it, like it's Chasing Unicorns is a very funny Estonian movie that's like a parody of the Estonian startup scene. The reason why I was going to mention it is because there's one scene that I find really funny, which is when they're in this Uber And there's a US investor who thinks he's in an Uber, and it has to be pointed out to him that, like, no, actually the driver is the head of the Estonian Manufacturers Union. And the investor replies, he actually makes things. Yeah, he's an Uber driver. He just doesn't know it yet. And it's very funny, but, we thought, then we actually had Sandra Saraf from Bolt, who came to join us in a recent episode of this podcast. So Bolt is, for those that don't know, like Uber, but better. Because we're totally biased here, because Bolt is an Estonian startup, of course. But she explained that actually Bolt has also become a manufacturing company. And we just, thought that was so interesting. And we didn't have too much time to go into it more in detail. But we thought it'd be kind of, a good idea to explore this a bit more, kind of like, how do you build a startup around physical products? Like, we talk so much about digital services, so let's get out of our comfort zone and let's talk about actually making physical products. And so, Kristjan, we thought you're going to be the best person to help us with that. You're the CEO and founder of Comodule. Can you give us the elevator pitch? Like, what is Comodule?
Comodule was built or founded to connect vehicles to the internet. So we started in 2014, creating IoT products, IoT technology to connect bikes and scooters to the internet. When we started in 2014, nobody understood why we're doing that. People were like, hey, why do you want to put a SIM card in a bicycle? Like, it doesn't make any sense. We felt already 2014 that micromobility or light electric vehicles are going to have a significantly more important role in the society than they had then. And today, I think nobody would ask, why would you need to connect these vehicles because of the scooter sharing and bike sharing. The only way how you can rent a bike or scooter is through internet and through sending a command to them. So basically, Comodule was built as a company to create IoT technology and sell this to vehicle manufacturing companies. So kind of a tier one company, a background company that helps to connect bikes and scooters. But today we have already evolved into a vehicle design and manufacturing company ourselves. As well as, in Tallinn, we're also running a sharing fleet of the scooters. So it's basically an end consumer product or service company as well. But if you compare us to, other scooter sharing companies, who else other than our focus is in like vehicle technology. So we're first and foremost vehicle builders and developers and technology builders. And then we build different business models or services on top of that. So I can't agree with you that Bolt is a manufacturing company.
No, I should have said in part that they have.
I don't even agree with that. Okay. So I guess, if you would say that Apple is a manufacturing company, then I would agree with you. So in that sense, Apple doesn't produce any of the stuff they have. It's all done by subcontractors. So it's basically the same story with Bolt. They just have people sitting in these factories and overlooking the production. But it's all produced, in Asia, in large manufacturing plants. So we do everything in-house. So we have our own factory in Estonia. So we go very, very deep into the manufacturing side of that as well.
Kristjan, how did you know this light vehicle market was going to take off? Because I have to say, it took me totally by surprise. Like, I thought, I guess back in 2014, when you were working on this, like, everyone was talking about like self-driving cars and, ride sharing was becoming such a big thing. And then suddenly, just in the last couple of years, started to see scooters appear everywhere. Then people are buying their own private scooters as well. And it just totally, it took me by surprise. How did you know this market trend was coming?
Well, our background is actually in building electric racing cars. So we've been involved into the automotive sector for a long time. That's the whole mobility side. The first time I drove a fully electric racing car, I understood that, it's completely over. Like, there's zero future for internal combustion. Because electric drive is so much more efficient, but it's also so much more fun. And from an engineering perspective, it's so much more simple. So electrification was clear to me, I would say, 2012, 2013. And then if you look further from there and you look all the global trends, urbanization, global warming, electrification, IoT, and you put all these together, then you basically end up in a place of electrified, connected light mobility. It just makes a lot of sense. So I think where we are operating is an area where all the macro or global trends are in favor of us. So I've always said it to my team as well that if we fail, we could only blame ourselves. Like it's not like, hey, the industry wasn't on our side or the market wasn't there. The market is clearly there, and we were too early even. I mean, the fact that we haven't had a very explosive growth in the first years was that we were too early. Like you also said, it took you by surprise. We were about 3-4 years early there in the game. But I think it's mainly driven by urbanization. I mean, you pointed out autonomous cars or ride-hailing. These don't reduce the number of cars. If you look at studies and research done in San Francisco, for example, it clearly indicates that ride-hailing has increased the number of congestion. So ride-hailing in this beautiful story, placed on the card that there will be less cars. Maybe less cars kind of what are owned, but at the same time, actually cars make more trips. Because ride-hailing is so convenient and it's still funded by VC money, so it's also very cheap. And in the end of the day, people do more rides with cars through ride-hailing than they would do otherwise. So actually, ride-hailing as such doesn't solve any congestion problems. And I think autonomous cars will be even worse. A lot of people haven't thought about it, but autonomous cars will dramatically reduce the price of ride-hailing. And so if you have a choice of walking, taking a scooter or a bus or a ride-hailing that's like half the price that it is today, you would most probably take ride-hailing, but it kind of feels very convenient and cheap. And then you will have even more cars. Or another example of what I've always pointed out, and I don't think people think about it, if you take your car to downtown and you go to the cinemas, for example, then often there's paid parking. And in Tallinn, it's quite expensive. So it's like, I don't know, 4 euros per hour or something like that. If your movie lasts for 2 hours, it's almost 8 euros for parking. If you would have your electric autonomous car driving around the block for 2 hours, it would cost you significantly less in the electricity cost for the car.
Interesting.
So it will cost you probably like 120, 150 for the electricity to the car to drive like 30 kilometers an hour for 2 hours around the block. So where we're getting to is that having your car to drive for 2 hours is cheaper than for the car to park. Or even a simpler example, you go to work in the morning and from outskirts to the downtown, and there's no parking, so you tell your car to go back home, and then you tell your car to come and pick you up in the evening. You have like double the traffic. So I think autonomous cars are horrible for like urban transportation. I think it's the worst thing that could happen, basically. I think autonomous cars just are good for long distance travel and for the safety of long distance travel and the comfort. So, you can, I don't know, play in your mobile phone while the car drives, and most probably the car will make better decisions than you, and it doesn't matter, it never gets tired and etc. But in like urban transportation, if there are no regulations, I think it will just explode. There will be a lot more cars on the streets.
It's interesting. I've never heard that perspective on autonomous cars before.
No, but I mean, think about it. It's like 8 euros to park or 150 to circumnavigate.
I wonder if we're going to need a law that says kind of you can't run your car empty around the city.
I think the only thing that you could say is personally owned cars cannot ride empty. I mean, that would kind of kill all these tricks. Yeah. But then you would say like, hi, why would I need an autonomous car if I can't call it to myself like in Knight Rider, right? So I think it's super kind of exciting technology. It's still a long way to go. But I don't think that autonomous cars will do any good for congestion or urban mobility.
On the subject of predicting future trends, like I was watching Back to the Future 2 recently, and everyone always complains about like, oh, we never did get these hoverboards. The future isn't as cool as they showed it to be. But like when I look around and see scooters everywhere, like they did kind of predict something similar. Okay, they don't hover, but I think it's even more amazing that we can just use an app to call them from anywhere. And so I think the future has worked out pretty okay in some ways.
No, I agree with you. If you look from a window and somebody goes by on an electric scooter, it kind of feels that they're hovering. So no, I think electric scooters are very, very cool.
Yeah. Kristjan, so let's go back to the beginning. Like, how did you meet your co-founders? You met them at university, did you? What's the story there?
So we actually initially had 5 co-founders, and we all took part. No, actually 4 of us took part in a student challenge or competition called Formula Student. So this is where university students design and build a racing car and then compete against other teams around the world. I actually initially went to study in France. Then I heard that there's a team like this in Estonia. I came back to Estonia, went to Tallinn, and then joined the team, and I ran the team for a little over 4 years. And I've always said that from like a physical perspective or stress perspective, building a startup is a child's play compared to building a racing car in 8 months. My record was 52 hours awake to achieve a deadline, for example. So that was extremely cool. We competed all around Europe. We competed in US twice. We became like top 3 team in the world without having any automotive industry in Estonia. And then when we were building our electric car, we need to fundraise that. Building an electric car was roughly twice as expensive as a combustion car. And then we were looking for every kind of fundraising opportunity. And then just Productron was launched. This is an Estonian kind of a fund where you can get money for your prototype ideas. And one of our guys was like, hey, I don't know, we need some money. There's something called Productron. I said, what's it about? He said, I don't know, just started. Okay, send it in. So we sent in to get money to build a racing car, but it was actually turned out to be a business competition or like startup idea competition. And then they were like, hey guys, you got to top 25, send us your one-pager. We're like, oh God, what is a one-pager? You know, we Googled. So we're like, okay, this is a one-pager. So we did an overnight, sent in a one-pager, and then they come back, and you know, we're all mechanical engineers. And then they come back like, oh my God, so cool. Yeah, you got to the next round. Send us your business plan. Like, business plan. Like, we don't want to do a business. We just want money to build a racing car. So we Googled the business plan and did an overnight, all-nighter, send it out. And then they're like, oh my God, super exciting, guys. You got to the final pitch. Like, what is a pitch? Oh, it's a presentation. Why didn't they tell us it's a presentation? So anyway, we go in for the pitch. And then just an hour before, we build a prototype. The company was called Formula Battery Management System, and it was about building smart battery technology. And so what we did, we put some battery cells and some wires in the PCB board, electronics board, and then we programmed the PCB board to flash green and red lights like after each other. That was our prototype, like on a cardboard sheet. And then we went in with that, or a plywood, and then we went into the jury, we did our pitch, and the jury said, your business plan is completely childish and ludicrous, but you guys rock. So we got 10,534 euros to build our business, but we used it all to buy battery cells for the electric car. And we built an electric car, we went to the competition. The only thing that didn't work was battery technology or the battery management system. So we basically blew the whole car, or we burnt down the batteries. So we got money to build a company, but we built a racing car, and then we went to competition and we toasted the racing car. So we didn't have a company.
You literally...
I mean, yeah, the batteries just like burned down.
Okay.
And then we didn't have a company, we didn't have a racing car, and we had to graduate. So we didn't also have a job nor a school anymore. And then one of the guys were like, we should do something, but hey, do you remember we had this business plan? So we opened up the business plan. We're like, hey, that's not that bad of an idea. So that's how we founded Comodule, basically. But quite quickly, from the 5 people, we had 3 remaining. And the third or the final member that we didn't have yet, him we found through Facebook, because we got to another startup competition in Barcelona. And then we needed an app. So I write to Facebook, does somebody know how to do apps? And then one guy said, I do, a friend of mine. And then we met in a pub, and then he joined us in the same evening. So most of the guys met in the university. One guy joined later, and then we've been pushing forward. But it's a funny story in the sense that we didn't feel a pain in the industry, or we didn't come together with an idea that, hey, we need to found a company. That was more like we wanted to build a racing car and ended up building a company.
And so fast forward to today, like how big is Comodule now? Like how many employees do you have?
We're 77 people now.
77, wow.
Yes, and last year we did Well, 16 million euros of revenue and a bit over 1 million of profit.
That's very impressive.
Well, the profit part is impressive, right? For a startup. I apologize. Next year we will try better.
And so how are things going this year? And are you... I think I read you're planning to raise more funds. Is that?
We are currently kind of semi-fundraising mode, yes. We have a plan how to accelerate our vehicle business side. We could do it also in kind of organic growth, but we're getting too old to do things organically. So we were fundraising to grow the vehicle side. This year we're going to have less revenue because we had a massive drop in the ride sharing world, because countries were in lockdown. But nevertheless, we have a lot of growth coming from the industry side. We call it industry side. That's where we sell the technology to companies who build bikes and scooters for end users. So this side is growing very rapidly, whereas the ride-hailing side was dropping quickly.
I see. So, Kristjan, let me help me get my head around the whole business then. Kind of what is it that you make and what do you offer?
So the main business of Comodule is building electronics that have a SIM card in there, and then putting this electronics into bikes and scooters. So there's this hardware component, actual electronics units that we produce now ourselves in our own factory. Then on this electronics unit, you have a code. It's called firmware. And then if it sits into the vehicle, then it connects to the vehicle subsystems, speaks the language of the vehicle, gathers the data from the vehicle, packages this data, then sends it to a server. This link is all managed by us. We also take the telecom contracts. Then this data is sent to the server, and then we kind of unpack the data, manage the data, and give this over to our customer. So the company who builds vehicles or the company who runs a sharing system. So this is basically the product. We get money for unit costs. So when we sell this hardware unit, one-time fee, and then we have a monthly fee for the service of the moving the data and making sure that everything works. So if you're in the startup world, you can look at us like Twilio, but with a hardware component.
Okay. So it's the hardware components, it's the services that go with that. And what about the actual platforms, the bikes and the scooters themselves?
So most of the original business is that we supply technology to companies who build bikes and scooters. So this is what Comodule is about. Now, when we look at what Tuul is doing, which is our brand for end consumer, then there we are building our own electric scooter, soon coming out with an electric bike as well. And these were actually built from the frustration of how badly electric scooters were built in the first 2-3 years of the service. And there we are moving into a vehicle company ourselves. We're not competing with our current customers because these vehicles are at the moment solely built for kind of sharing purposes mainly, and the scooter maybe also for end consumer. But yeah, the core business is IoT for vehicle manufacturers.
And to what extent do you have to tailor these services and products to each kind of
That is a very
company?
good question. I think that is the biggest challenge in what we do, that it's actually very difficult to be a sole product company. So in the sense that we have...
Everyone wants something different.
So it's going, maybe it's to explain to the listeners, it's something like, Nordtal or these guys do. They have these core specifics, for example, in e-governance. They have this base knowledge, and then they kind of tailor make it a little bit for every customer. It's not that bad for us. The hardware component is usually the same, but yes, you have to write a little bit specific code for every customer you have. But this is also, on the other hand, it's a great moat or a great entry barrier for your competition. So, for example, one of our customers is Pon Bike Group, which is Europe's largest e-bike manufacturing company. They do more than 500,000 e-bikes per year, and we're now completely kind of embedded into their bikes, which means that it would take a couple of years for anybody else to start competing with us there, So basically, once you're you're in there, and you have a very steady cash flow coming from there.
So 77 employees. How are they split between like engineers and other business kind of development functions?
Engineering is around 60%. So we're super engineering heavy company. Yeah. I'm very proud of that. So we're first and foremost about innovation and engineering and being on the edge of technology.
It must be difficult to find the talent you need for that.
No.
Oh, okay.
The funny thing is that as we don't build only web-based services, we're much more in the hardware, firmware, mechanical game. Then the people we hire come from ABB, Ericsson, these large industrial companies. And it's relatively easy to attract people, from a large factory on the outskirts of Tallinn to a old town office, and most importantly, to the fact that these people clearly see what is the result of their work. So for us, actually having electronics or firmware engineers, it's not that difficult. And the other aspect is that people really care about what we do. It's a massive effect. I would say 80% of people who join us now, they say that they join us because of our mission. And our mission is to make the world a better place, through cleaner modes of transport. And people really care. I mean, I know Sandra in the last episode covered this as well, that for Bolt, it's a very good kind of hiring, ad that they're sustainable. And I think it really works. People really care where they work and what they do.
And you do this manufacturing in Estonia. I guess my question just is why. I guess people don't necessarily associate Estonia very much with manufacturing. Although, like, if you travel around the kind of periphery of Tallinn and Tartu, you do start to see a surprisingly large number of kind of light manufacturing facilities, I guess, making components. Yeah,
Estonia is really, really strong, actually, in electronics manufacturing. A lot of people don't know, but the world's largest factory of Ericsson is in Tallinn.
Really? Huh.
So, Tallinn is one of the hotspots in the world to make 5G routers. So basically, there's a lot of electronics manufacturing. Electronics manufacturing is just interesting because it's completely clean. There's no emission pipes, and it's quiet and etc. So it kind of just blends in. You don't even notice it from the outskirts. Or from outside, you can look. Oh, it's just a warehouse building. Yeah. Actually, they make some super high tech stuff. But your question was why? So when we told that we're going to build an electric scooter, over kind of the 1.5 years when we were developing it, whoever I met, absolutely zero, nobody told me it's a good idea. I think I talked with more than 100 people. Everybody told me it's a bad idea because it's done in China, right? Mm-hmm. Even my mom didn't say it's a good idea. So, but the thing with entrepreneurs is that if you tell them it can't be done, it actually gives them more power. I think a lot of people in the Western, in Europe and in US, but mostly even in US, have a very weird look at the world. And I think especially in the startup industry where it's always been about software and SaaS and data, and we completely kind of detach ourselves from the actual world, we kind of forget that, the cars actually have to be made somewhere, or it's cool to do a ride-hailing company, but where do you get the car from? Or it's cool to do a scooter sharing company, where do you get the scooters from? Or, okay, you have an app, but where does it run on? It needs a mobile phone for that. And somehow we have this impression that software is where the high growth and the value and all the money is. But you forget to look at China. China has never had an exporting software company. Never. Alibaba is maybe now close there. Now they have TikTok, right? But before that, they've never had anything. They've only produced things. And China has become one of the strongest countries in the world. So, there's some logic. There is some value in building real products. And I think the problem is that Chinese, government, marketing agencies and the companies, they have really done good job with kind of programming our minds to an extent where we really say, oh, it cannot be done because it's done in China. But nobody never really does the math. They don't look into the details of it. They mostly never have been in China in these factories. So we've done it all, and we just did the math, and we're like, hey, it makes a lot of sense to produce in Estonia. It's not more expensive to produce in Estonia if we get to scale.
Really?
And finally, the vertical integration aspect is just a killer. I mean, it's like, for example, now we run this Tuul scooter sharing in Tallinn. We put something out. We get feedback from the customer at the same night or in the next morning. We implement these design ideas to the team in like 3 or 4 days. We get new parts. So basically we can make product iterations in a week and put them back on the street. And it's mind blowing. I mean, in China, if you buy something from China, you can do that maybe in 6 months. So it's like 1 week compared to what's 6 times 4, 24, you know, it's like 24 time difference. So I believe the whole world will go so much more back to vertical integration, so that the same company offers the service and builds the product. You know, you can look at Apple, like world champion vertical integration, although they don't manufacture themselves, but they control the whole manufacturing system. They design the product, they do the software, and they do the services. Super successful company. If you look at Tesla, who's becoming #1 company in the world, completely vertically integrated. So I think the world is moving towards vertical integration. And the mindset that software is all is something that probably was the hype from 2000 to 2020. And I think from 2020 to 40, we're more being to vertical integration and production.
Interesting. I'm just realizing what a bubble I live in, because I'm always surrounded by kind of people in digital services, and I don't think enough about manufacturing, including here in Estonia. I did actually see in the news yesterday, like exports for goods of Estonian origin are up 15% kind of last month compared on a year. Like even with all the challenges of the pandemic, like there is a lot of amazing things happening here.
But actually, pandemic is an opportunity for us. I mean, what pandemic did was it started to, you know, people started to think, hey, does it make sense that I rely 100% on China, right? I mean, even the mask situation, you know, what happened? We need masks. Oh, but nobody can make them. They only make them in China. so that, you know, there's a lot of even like strategically important things we need to move back. Pandemic gave a big impact also in Estonian electronics manufacturing. So in Estonia, we have a lot of, you know, like what you call it, service electronic manufacturing service companies who build electronics for other companies. And all of these companies have had a massive rise in their orders. So, you know, European and Nordic companies who used to produce in China, they're also bringing that back to Europe because it's too risky to put everything in one card. So I think it's clearly moving back. But the next step from having things produced for you is actually producing them yourself.
So, Kristjan, you're the Elon Musk of light electric, of light vehicles. You're
this I wouldn't say, but you can call Comodule as the future Tesla of light electric vehicles. Yes.
Okay, but even in respect of like, you don't want to outsource things abroad. You want to do vertical integration. Really interesting. You've talked a bit about sustainability. What makes your manufacturing processes sustainable? How is that improving?
Well, that comes really from the core for us. The #1 reason why we built our own scooter was because we saw how badly the Chinese scooters were done. You know, at one moment we were connecting more than 100,000 scooters globally. So we had data coming in. We saw what it was their actual lifetime and etc. We were far deeper in it than, you know, media. And
because something's not environmentally friendly, if it takes loads of like environmental costs to make, then you have to replace it and make another one. Kind of
absolutely. I mean, sustainability is first and foremost about lifetime. So it doesn't matter that much of exactly what you put in. It matters very much on how long does it last. I mean, I have a colleague who has a 100-year-old bicycle, right? A bicycle is built to last 100 years if you maintain it correctly. A car, whether it's a Dacia or it's a Porsche, lasts minimum 15 years, you know, usually like 20 years. And then you had this scooter segment that just lasted for, I don't know, few months, you know, completely ridiculous. And the only reason why it lasted for a few months was because it's badly done. So that was where, you know, really our core came. But when we look at how we make our scooter, it's really designed from ground up to be sustainable. We guarantee a long lifetime, minimum 5 years on the street in sharing, but in ownership 10 plus years for sure. But for example, a lot of companies talk about recyclability and end of life. But for us, it's completely next level in the sense that we already use more than 40% of recycled material when we make the scooter. So we already use recycled material to make it. And then it's 100% recyclable end of life. And we really go deep. I mean, for example, if you bring in aluminum, then we did a very in detail study. If you buy aluminum in Europe, the carbon footprint of a kilogram of aluminum in Europe is around 27 times less than the carbon footprint of aluminum in China. And there's two reasons for that. So basically you can make the same product from the same material, but your carbon footprint difference is 27 times. And the reason for that is that all of the aluminum we use is already recycled. It's collected from the European market, and then it's smelted again and put in together in Norway using only hydro energy. When you take aluminum in China, it comes from the earth because everything is made in China and then shipped out. And then it's melted using electricity from coal because that's where a large majority of electricity comes from in China. So I think if you want to build a sustainable product, it's really going down to your whole supply chain and then understanding how it's built. So if somebody says we make it from aluminum and aluminum is very recyclable, true, but it also depends on where does this aluminum come from. And it turned out to be a 27 times difference where it comes from. So it's very detailed. In manufacturing, it goes very detailed. You have to go very deep. I think in software, it's quite easy. You say, hey, I use 5 gigabytes of data, and now I buy it from Amazon, and I put a tick there that it's sustainable, and now I feel good. Like I'm carbon neutral. But reality, the most carbon comes from physical products, and that the fact that we actually move, and you have to go much deeper in there, and that's our main mission to do that.
Interesting, because I guess like a few years ago you could get away with that kind of greenwashing.
Greenwashing is.
But people are getting much smarter. Like legislation is coming, and this pandemic crisis is going to be over, but the environmental crisis is still going to be around. People are thinking more and more about kind of carbon imprints.
Yeah, I mean, greenwashing is something that I've taken as a mission to fight against. I think it's an obligation for everybody of us who are in this and who understand it to constantly educate people around us. I mean, I can bring you one of the craziest examples of greenwashing lately is when American airline company Delta said that they're going to be carbon neutral, I don't remember, in 10 years or something. Like, an airline company cannot be carbon neutral. It's just like impossible. Like it's a bloody airline. It burns fuel when it flies. It's like impossible. Like the only way that they could say is that, hey, we offset it. But this is just immense, quantity to offset. It's just not going to work. So there's a lot of companies saying that they will be. And there's a very big difference whether you are or you will be. And I think this is the main thing that people should always look into. If somebody promises to do something in the future, that means that they haven't done jack shit at the moment. So always look at companies who are actually doing something.
Okay. Kristjan, can you give us an idea of like how far around the world your products and services are in operation right now? Like how many?
So we have connected more than 300,000 electric vehicles
300,000
in more than 46 different countries. So we go from North America, South America. We are in South Africa. We're all around Europe. We're in Japan, Australia, New Zealand, in India. We had something going on in South Korea. So quite a global footprint.
It's a big chunk of the global market then for light vehicles.
Absolutely. And I mean, as I said, Pon Bike, world's second largest manufacturer, biggest in Europe. We have a joint product coming out with Shimano, which is the company in bike industry like Bosch in automotive. So when you look at connecting bikes and scooters to the internet, we're clearly the world leader in what we do, kind of embedded into the industry very deeply. And so we see that we're making great progress there. But the whole thing of building our own vehicle, I think the motivation there was that like we are there, but we still see there's so much to do, and the industry is still too slow. So we said that we want to be in the driving seat ourselves as well and push the industry further even more. I think very similar motivation like when Tesla was started. Like they basically said that they have this strong belief that the electric car is the best thing for the humankind and it will win. And if a lot of people don't remember that, but when Tesla started, they actually did a joint deal with Mercedes-Benz or Daimler where they supplied technology to Daimler. So the initial plan of Tesla was to build just like demo vehicles, like really cool vehicles to show the capability of technology and then sell technology to other automakers. So Tesla didn't plan to become an automaker in the beginning. But then they saw that, hey, you know, they have the cool technology that Daimler is just so slow in implementing it. And from this frustration, they decided like, heck it, we're going to just build a big automotive company ourselves. I think we're in a little bit of a similar position. We've provided technology to others now for 5-6 years, but we see that there's still so much to do. And that's why we're kind of stepping up and building our own vehicles.
And so, you know, localization can be pretty tricky for startups. Like there's always, not just for kind of like cultural and market reasons, but also for issues of legal compliance. But I guess that's relatively simple when it comes to digital services compared to actually making hardware. Like how do you know that how do you get your head around like why your components are kind of legally compliant in all the different countries you're sending them to?
That's a very good question. So we have to certify our IoT products in every market we go to. So you have one certification for Europe, you have FCC for US, you have different certifications in South America and Australia and Japan and etc. And there's a process what you have to go through. When we had one customer launching in Brazil, we needed to get certifications really, really fast, and Brazil was super slow. So what ended up was that one of our engineers flew to Brazil and sat in the certification laboratory for 2 weeks for them to get this through. So yes, you always have a background where you have to do things to actually launch your products. So in that sense, again, you can say that it's not that easily scalable. But at the other side, it's extremely, there's not many people in the world who can do that. So once you get certified and once you are legal in whichever country, it's very difficult for others to follow. So yeah, there is this challenge, but we're really on top of that game. And we've gone through that with all of our IoT products. So when we look at the vehicle, it's actually easy for us to do. We don't see any hurdles there.
And so we talked about the way Tesla's plans changed, kind of like, how else have your plans changed and kind of what are you thinking about in future?
I think in the future, we will be a massively large end user light vehicle company. So we will build a vehicle brand ourselves and sell them directly to end users. We have a plan how to reach €1 billion of revenue. I worked on the plan for the past 6 months, and today I'm super confident that we will do it. It's just a question of what's the time, how long does it take to reach that milestone. If you just look at the market size and where the world is moving, then we're very confident we can achieve that. So yeah, we're going to be a vehicle company selling directly to end consumer. And what we do today on the B2B side, that will still be there, but I think it will be like slowly fading out.
So your business plan writing skills have improved a lot since your Formula racing car days.
I don't know, I wouldn't say that, I guess, but at least we're modeling things a lot better now, yes, or at least we're doing it. But I still don't write business plans.
Okay.
I enjoy building products.
And I've asked a lot about the hardware, but like in terms of software, it kind of what do people want to come with? Yeah, what do they want in the software?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about a vehicle, vehicle is it is metal and it's pieces and it's how it puts together. But a lot of it today, the vehicle itself creates value, but the services and the software you put on creates the most value, I would even say. So, for example, if you buy a Xiaomi or a Chinese scooter, it's more of a toy, but the biggest problem, I think, is that you can never leave it anywhere because whoever can turn it on and drive away with it. Very simple thing for us to do is, Bluetooth lock, unlock, and Bluetooth proximity. So our scooter, basically, the moment you walk to it, it turns on automatically. The moment you walk away from it, it turns off automatically. If somebody tries to steal it, the motor is blocked. You can't even push it with your leg. You can never turn it on, and etc. So if you have this vertical integration, you can build in things that are really, really cool, but in the end of the day, they don't, increase the price because it's basically software only. The scooters we sell today, they also have a fully integrated insurance offering with it. So even if something happens with a scooter, it gets stolen, it's covered by the insurance. So, the product will not be hardware only. The product is a combination of hardware, software, and services you build on top of that. And I think this is how the whole kind of consumer space is changing. It's not going to be, I just bought something. It's about, I bought something, but I also want to make sure that it always works and it has services attached to it.
I was actually riding a scooter the other day and I rode it into Tallinn's Old Town, and the top speed immediately just suddenly dropped down as soon as I crossed that kind of invisible border. And I thought that's really clever. I guess there are new software updates coming all the time.
Yeah, and this is actually a requirement by the city, so that's why it happens.
But how does your revenue split between hardware and software?
So when we look at last year, then roughly 50-50. 50% is okay, what comes from the hardware sales, and the 50 is pure gross margin from the service.
So it's not like one subsidizing the other. You're really committed to both, and
yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's so difficult with the startup people, right? It's like everybody's always like, oh, okay, hardware. So I guess the hardware is just the enabler for the software, and the software is where you will see the growth, and etc. I mean, honestly, no. What we see our growth in is the vehicle, is the production, and we see software as a complement on top of it. Kind of a feature of the whole product is that it also has good software. For us, for many companies, hardware is like with the base to build software on. I think for us, it's a little bit of the other way around. Software is just like something that you put on top of it to make it work, but hardware is a very important part of it. And I think I'm early. It's actually quite difficult to find people who believe in that. Especially in the kind of venture capital side, because they're used to looking at B2B SaaS companies. I'm sure that a couple of years from now, when we have grown significantly and people understand how big of a moat we have built, they will understand us differently. And I mean, I think Tesla and Apple are the prime examples of hardware, right? Why people buy Apple's products is first and foremost about how well the hardware and software work together. And why people buy Tesla's product is first and foremost because they have the longest range and they are really good cars. And then about the fact that there's software updates and there's a mobile phone app and etc. Right? All BMWs now also have a mobile phone app. So it's really about putting these things together. It's not about I just have some hardware and then I build software on top of it.
Would you ever be interested in selling your bikes and scooters directly to the public? Or?
Correct, we already do that.
Oh, really?
If you go to tuul.xyz, then there's a link where you can buy it.
Okay.
It's very low key. We will go big in the spring, but we have already sold in Estonia. So you have people riding around your personal scooters in Estonia.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that. I will definitely go check that out. tuul.xyz. Okay.
So basically, that's what I say. I think 5 or 10 years from now, we are an end consumer brand.
Okay.
Super bloody exciting. I think the only end consumer brand you have in Estonia and startup world is Bolt, right? Basically, all the others are B2B or in the background. Transferwise, semi. But most of them are in the background. We've been in the background as well. For me, it's super exciting to be in the end consumer side. It's especially if you're in enterprise, your customers are large companies. Pipedrive, their customers are basically the people who work in companies. But for most Estonian startups, your customers are large companies. Walmart or Uber or whoever. And for me now, retrospectively, I understand that this has been a pain for me personally because it's just a long sales cycle and it takes you 3 or 4 years and there's a lot of lunches and dinners and big contracts. the actual live feedback you get from a consumer product is like super cool. I really, really like it. And I urge a lot of Estonian companies to build more consumer businesses because end of the day, the consumer businesses are the businesses that are on the stock market, and then they are feeded in by most of the B2B companies. So consumer businesses are the businesses that in the end are the biggest. I really urge people to do more consumer businesses. I also give you a disclaimer that it's going to be super difficult to raise money, especially in Estonia, because all Estonian VC funds or angels, they're like, hey, we invest in B2B companies. So we have a lot of this mindset, even in early beginning of Estonia, we were subcontract manufacturing. In the Soviet times, we were subcontract manufacturing for the Soviet. We've never really had end consumer brands. But we have to move there. I mean, that's how you get to the top of the food chain, and it's super exciting. Just something that I want to tell everybody.
So it's not like a side project, and it's not just like a way of marketing the kind of where the bigger revenue comes from selling kind of bulk orders to other companies. Like you believe that this is like a huge viable part of the business as well.
Well, for me, in the last 1.5 years, that's 80% of my focus.
Really? Wow.
So the B2B side is functional. We have people who do really good job there. We're really deep into the business. It's going very well. But it's not going like explosive hyper growth. It's going well, 50% growth per year, something like that. And we could be happy with it. I mean, we had 1.5 million euros of profit last year. I think we could get to very nice profits and good growth company. But I think we're too young to do that. We want to have a bigger impact, and we want to change. The world. And I think by building our own large-scale vehicle production in Estonia, this would be something significantly more exciting to do than stay where we are.
So for now it's the scooters and possibly in future the bikes as well for
yes,
sale.
And then maybe mopeds and then maybe motorcycles. So there is a lot to do in the light vehicle sector.
And what's the price tag?
The scooter currently goes for 1,500 euros.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And you get a lot for that.
Yeah. I'm not too sure how that compares to the rest of the market, but I guess it's on the premium end.
Correct. So basically, what is very interesting with scooters, I'll give you 2 interesting facts. One of them is that in every category, you have cheap and then you have premium. You can buy a 200 euro smartphone and you can buy a 1,500 euro iPhone. Mm-hmm. You can buy a Dacia or you can buy a Porsche, right? But in cars, but in scooters, you can buy a 600 euro scooter or like a 900 euro scooter, and they're both crap. One is just a little less crap.
Yeah.
But the reason why there's no kind of differentiation is because the product is only like 2 years old for the world. So I'm sure that this will also get into different categories, and we will also get into different categories. So this is our starting point, something ultra durable that lives on the street, swappable batteries, completely unstealable, really, really good product built to last. But we will also go into different segments, even maybe higher premium, and then also lower price, lower incoming, but maybe less features. So this will evolve over the time. And the second thing maybe that I want to point out that is, I think, again, very interesting. People don't think about it. We all talk about scooter sharing because it's like really in the news. At the same time, scooter sharing as such is 20 times smaller than scooter ownership already in Europe today. In Estonia, they sell around 8,000 scooters, and in Tallinn, what you have operating is around 2,000 scooters. And these will not be replaced every year. So every year they sell 8,000, there's only 2,000. In Europe, you have around 200,000 scooters in sharing, and you sell around 2 million per year. So actually, ownership is much bigger. So all of Bolts or Birds or even Tuul's sharing, they're all about replacing the taxi, right? It's about replacing the taxi. But there's this huge world of ownership, owning their own scooter. And I think if you use it on a daily basis, you want to own it. You want to be relying on it. That's always there, and you can go from A to B. And there's a very simple logic you can do there. How many cars on the streets are taxis or ride-hailing, and how many cars are privately owned? So and that also gives you this perspective how much there is to do to actually sell light electric vehicles to people.
And the running costs, I guess, are much lower than owning your own car.
there's basically no running costs. Like we've seen it from operating our scooters as well, that the electricity that goes in there, you're talking about, I don't know, 5 to 10 euros per month. It's just basically non-existent when you compare it to a car.
Yeah. Because, at first 1,500 seems a lot, but actually, like, I remember living in London, and the amount I used to spend, like, just on like a bus pass, tube pass per month was incredible. I guess the only drawback in places like London is the regulations are quite slow to catch up. I think at present scooters still aren't legal.
They're illegal. Yes, they will be legal from January already.
Okay. Do you keep an eye on regulations around the world, and like how can you help influence those?
Absolutely. Scooters are being legislated all around Europe by now. UK is the last one. Actually, no, Holland is the last one, or Netherlands. They still ban them. Everywhere else, they're now legal. But I think what is even more interesting from the legislative side is how the governments are, pushing or helping people to converge. So you have in many places, you have government subsidies when you buy an electric vehicle. In Lithuania, for example, they had this cool campaign. If you give in your old car, you get 1,000 euros to buy an e-bike or an e-scooter.
Interesting.
In Paris, they give you, I think, 500 euros to buy an e-bike or an e-scooter. So, it's so simple math that riding and light electric vehicle is so significantly better for the society that the governments are also pushing for that. I think it makes a lot of sense to give 1,000 euros to buy an e-bike compared to giving, 5 or 10,000 euros to buy a car, an e-car, electric car that doesn't actually solve the problem of the city. So this is, I think, the more interesting side. And what I see in the future, I think there will be a pan-European setup how to help people buy electric vehicles, because today it's very scattered among countries. It's very complicated, but I think it will converge into a pan-European setup.
And I guess one of the good things about being in Estonia is that things can be kind of tested and laws can be changed on relatively quickly. And
the main reason for us to have this sharing system in Tallinn is to test whatever we build. So this is epic. It's almost taking vehicle or hardware engineering and manufacture to the same level of code. If you have code, you deploy code to an app and you find a bug, you fix it, and you deploy and it's fixed, right? 24 hours, everything can be fixed. In hardware, it's usually 6 months. In cars, it's 8 years. For us, it's now also like 2 weeks, because we deploy them on the street, we find something out, and we take them back, and we've already made changes. So this is the main reason of why we do sharing.
What happened to the bike sharing market? Like, I remember even in Tallinn, I remember seeing bikes start to appear, then they disappeared, and I guess around the world they've really been replaced by scooters. We talk so much about scooters, but what's going on with bike sharing and the e-bike market?
That's a good question. So bike sharing, station-based bike sharing, owned by cities, is something that is around 21 years old in Europe, started in Lyon, France. You have hundreds of thousands of mechanical station-based bikes in Europe that are very often subsidized by the cities. What is happening is that most of these bikes are being turned electric, like in Tartu, for example, in Estonia, and these are very popular. So I actually predict that all of the scooter sharing haze that we have going on most probably will be commoditized and owned by the government in the next 5 years or so. I think it's going to be extremely difficult for these companies, because public transport is mostly owned by the city in Europe. Metros, buses, trains, bike sharing for the last 20 years. And now you have the scooter sharing that's kind of privatized. There's two options: whether everything will move towards privatization and cities will subsidize it, or the other option, which is the reality today, is that actually everything will be publicly owned. And I think that's a higher chance where the scooter sharing is going. If you look at Paris, if you look at UK, they already do this kind of tenders where they give out licenses for the scooter sharing companies to operate. I think the next step is that they're not going to give license. They will give out like a proper tender where you operate the scooters, but it has a city brand on it and it's actually owned by the city, basically. So in that sense, I think from the startup mindset, this is not going to be a very good market for startups to operate because their growth will be limited by city regulations.
Really interesting. So it'll be, like trains or buses, kind of different models for how the state kind of controls the market. And
I mean, if you think about it, even today, why scooter sharing is a difficult thing to do is because you're competing with public transport, and public transport is subsidized, especially in Tallinn where public transport is free.
Yeah.
So, you also pointed out London, how much money you spent on a pass for the public transport. Here it's free. So you really have to build a very good service for people to ride.
Interesting. What kind of services? So to the ride kind of ride sharing apps, kind of what services do you have to provide them after delivering the product as well? We talked about kind of hardware, software, the platform, but what kind of ongoing care do you have to provide?
So our job is that the vehicles are always online, the data flows, and you can always send commands to them. So we don't usually build the front-end app or the data analytics for their rides, but we are kind of the infrastructure or the pipeline. So we take care that everything is online. We get fee for that, and if something fails, it's our responsibility. For example, we had a failure in Poland more than a year ago, where around 5,000 units went offline in 1 hour. And we basically had 3 cars going from Tallinn to Poland to swap all these units. And later it turned out that the Polish National Weather Institute had sent an SMS message to all SIM cards in Poland saying that there will be a thunderstorm, don't go under a tree. And this message was with Polish characters, which meant that it was like 12 SMSs long. And we had made a small bug in our code that couldn't read that long messages. And so all of our units failed. So basically that was our responsibility. We swapped them and then we paid for the lost damages also for the customer.
Okay. And I think I read that your company was originally established in Germany. But you have an Estonian company as well. What's your future plans for that?
Yeah, we actually moved to Berlin when we started. So we lived more than 2 years in Berlin in the beginning. The plan is actually to bring HQ to Estonia. So I think Bolt has done an extremely good job in there in telling to the VC world as well that invest in a legal entity in Estonia. We want to do the same. We can legally do it from the second part of next year. So probably 2022 beginning will be an Estonian company.
Okay, fantastic. Can you bring in manufacturing to? I mean, your business is in Estonia already, I guess.
Yeah,
just
actually,
the legal aspect.
Only the holding is in Germany, and we don't win anything from it. And the only thing we lose is that we have to do like more bookkeeping for it, and it's kind of just tedious. So that's why we want to bring it back.
And you've mentioned a bit about how the pandemic is affecting your business. Kind of how has it been for your company, for your employees? And
for us, we lost like 70% of our monthly recurring revenue in if over like a 2-month period, and then we lost our biggest customer with a 3-hour notice period. So our biggest customer was jumped by Uber, a Uber subsidy. And we got an email from a guy saying, hey, I think it's my last day. And then 2.5 hours later, there was a press statement that the whole company shut down. So for us, it was very sudden and very harsh. At the same time, what has kind of been interesting is that the pandemic has pushed people more to privately owned vehicles. So the part of industry for us where people build vehicles for people, this has been sold out. So this is in a very good growth. But the sharing part, dropped very quickly. So it's a weird situation where in short term it's super difficult, but at the same time you see that mid and long term it's actually good for your business. So it's more of about a cash flow problem rather than an actual fundamental problem for the business.
Interesting. Yeah, from my perspective as well, like I've been using ride sharing slightly less because I've had less places to go to. But then for kind of scooters, like I've been using them so much more because I'd rather just jump on a scooter than jump onto a busy bus.
Yeah, and I think, but what is interesting is that, public space or a private space got a new meaning. So everybody was like, hey, it's going to be very good for scooters. because everybody's going to ride and nobody wants to be in public transport. But actually, these high peaks of cases or these lockdown moments have been really, really bad still. Because yes, people would use scooters, but people just don't go anywhere. So it's very interesting mix, that yes, you are the best way to move. But if nobody moves, then it's difficult for a mobility company. So I think actually for all of those ride-hailing and scooter-sharing companies, it's been a very difficult time. Because just from like one day, nobody moved and they were not allowed to move. They got a fine when they went outside. And now we're going back to it. In France, Germany, you already have the same rules applied. In Belgium as well. So people can't move. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of these rights drop very, very quickly.
In the first episode of this season, we had Rein Ranu, as I mentioned, and he was talking about how the pandemic is going to come to an end in a couple of years, and we really need to be preparing now for the world afterwards when things go maybe not back to normal, but at least the pandemic is going to be over, and we've got to move on from there with what we've learned. And I've got to be honest, I actually found it a little bit difficult to believe all that time ago when we recorded the first episode, because the world looked like a much darker place now then. But now we've just had the news about great progress with a vaccine, and you really do feel that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and startups really need to be thinking about what happens when lockdowns end, when social distancing can end, and hopefully that day is going to come sooner than later, even if it's not going to be in the near future. So you're thinking about the future. You've got your plan to get to 1 billion euros in revenue. Can you give us a few insights into, without giving away too many secrets, what you're going to be mostly focusing on?
So the 1 billion euro of revenue will come from selling roughly 500,000 vehicles per year to end consumers and other operators. So that's in short where we're going. We will be building the vehicles ourselves in Estonia in our own manufacturing. It's going to be a lot about the product, but as well as about industrial innovation. How to build products with the least impact and time consumed. In the manufacturing, there's one of the coolest, ideas is called lights out manufacturing. So when you're in manufacturing, your goal is always that you can close the lights or turn off the lights in the factory because there's nobody there. So and everything will still be done. So this is the level of automation you're always dreaming of. But yes, it's going to be building vehicles in Europe, mostly for Europe, for an explosively growing market, and solving the urban mobility problem through that.
On that note, Kristjan, thank you so much for giving up your time. And so it's tuul.xyz if you want to check out how to buy your own. Thank you so much. I've learned so much. This has brought me out of my bubble, because I'm always thinking in digital services, and I've just completely overlooked all the awesome manufacturing work that's going on here too. But it's all integrated as well. Thank you so much. So yeah, this is the 6th episode, and I want to say a huge thank you to all the guests we've had this season who shared really valuable advice. As I mentioned, we had film director and angel investor Rein Ranu from Super Angel in California. He previously founded Fortumo. So he talked to us about how to craft a compelling company story. We've had Carolee Hendricks, who founded Jobatical and talked about how to pivot a business. She made the very tough decision to say goodbye to 500,000 users that they had built up. And yet the company is in a much stronger position now. So that was a really interesting story. Taavi Tamkivi from Salve talked to us about how to avoid the mistakes of first-time founders. Taavi helped build Skype and TransferWise, two hugely successful Estonian startups, before creating Salve as a first-time founder to scale up his financial crime-fighting service. We had Sandra Sarav, who we've mentioned a few times in this episode, who joined us from Bolt, and she told us how to help save the planet while still making a profit. And we talked about greenwashing and how to actually do kind of real work to help save the environment. So that's really interesting to listen to. In the last episode, Lelia Rohuma and Jürgen Matzi from Pipedrive came to talk to us about something very, very important, which is how to take care of your mental health of both you and your team while building a startup. And I think even just like talking about those issues openly is really important, but they also had so much great expertise to share. And finally, today we had Kristjan Maruste from Comodule, who's talking to us about how to build a startup with physical products. So if you haven't checked out the other episodes, please go back. They're on YouTube, or just subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It's well worth it. And as I mentioned, like when we recorded the first episode, the world seemed like a bit of a darker place. And Rein was talking optimistically about how the pandemic is going to end, and we need to urgently be thinking now about, you know, what kind of how our startups are going to be, what kind of world they're going to be helping create afterwards. And, you know, he was right. You know, we can see a lot more optimism right now. Things are looking up. But yeah, please do go back, listen to those episodes, and there may be another season on the way soon next year. So follow at Startup Estonia to learn more about that. And, you know, if you are interested in starting up in Estonia, like all the people that we've featured, then visit startupestonia.ee. Those guys are like really eager to help provide lots of help with everything from startup visa to contacts to legal documents. So just reach out to them. And, you know, that's one of the best things about doing business in Estonia, is that it's so easy to reach out for anyone and ask for their advice. It's, you know, we're like a family. So this is the end of season 3. There may be a 4th season on the way. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are in the world, wherever you happen to be listening, however you choose to create a startup, good luck. Because it doesn't matter whether you're working on a startup to help save the world from this virus, or if you've just got a startup that's going to make the world slightly better for a few people. The world needs you more than ever. Thank you very much. Goodbye.